Well, welcome to the Beyond the Device podcast, where we explore the life-defining moments that shape careers within the medical device industry. We are particularly interested in understanding how someone's personal experiences, journeys, hardships, as essentially. Right, let me start that again. Right, start again. Welcome to the Beyond the Device podcast, where we explore the life-defining moments that shape careers within the medical device industry. We are particularly interested in understanding how personal experiences, challenges, pivotal events influence professional journeys. And as we progress through the conversation, we will eventually land on the question, what is the one pivotal moment, turning point that put you on the path that you're on to today and changed everything for you? Today's guest has worked in the medical device industry, defense industry, and engineering innovation for over 40 years. He's currently the technical director at the PM Group, where he focuses across capital projects in medical devices and pharma. And he plays a key role in robotics, smart manufacturing, and regulatory compliance. Before that, he held a director role at Integra Life Sciences, launching products across the EU and the US, and even helped pioneer one of the first VoIP-based trading systems back in his telecom days. So it's a great pleasure to introduce Sean to the podcast. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Nathan. Nice, good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome, Sean. And if we can just go back to where your story began, if you can just tell us a bit about your early years and what shaped you growing up.
Yeah, well, I was born back in 1964 in Portsmouth in the UK. Grew up there. I had a bit of a sick childhood. I was born with rheumatoid arthritis back in the day, and I spent a lot of my early years in the Royal Hospital in Portsmouth, which is no longer there. Trying to get my legs straight. One leg was longer than the other. I had to wear special shoes for many years. So I wasn't the fittest child, and that reflected I was a bit tubby going to school when I went to school. I went to a local Court Lane Junior School, and then into from the infants, and then I went to Springfield. I was the first year of the comprehensive system in the UK. So, all things that shape your experiences, a lot of firsts throughout my life. I mean, if you think about it, since 1964, I've seen computers, the internet, decimalization, all sorts of things have happened in my time. And that really helps in the way I look at things and change, behavioral changes because of circumstances. There's been a lot of other influences in early years, like when I get to 17, the Falklands War comes out, and there's always the opportunity you might get called up. So, so that's one of the other things that sort of shapes on those experiences. But what I've been thinking about it because you challenged me on those things, and it became to realization that my childhood wasn't the best. And we'll talk about that as we get to it. But and it really accumulated in one of the most defining moments in my life. And we'll get to that point. But, some of my early influences, if you think about it, was probably my grandparents. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. My grandfather was one of the first to do something as well. He was in the RAF and flying boats. And he was in the first flight that had on-board radar. So a navigation system. He was one of the first navigation officers that, took to the air with that on board. So, one of my early aspirations, if you think of it, was I'd like to follow in his footsteps and join the RAF. So went to the Air Scouts, got my Chief Scouts Award, so a bit of a nerd growing up, to be honest. Then I applied to be a pilot, and I got accepted to do that, but I bottled out at the last minute and decided to pursue a different class. But we'll get to that as we go through. What else?
From an academic perspective, what path did you follow in terms of passions, subjects? Because a lot of the people that we speak to either go down a scientific route or an engineering route.
Well, I guess my influences would have more the engineering route. As I said, it was the first computers. So back when I was back in 1975, 76, we had a young teacher join the school, and he brought computer studies to the school. And I got really interested in that, and I learned to program in a language called Cecil, which you probably never heard of and never will hear of again. But it was programming out as sort of machine code into cards, and then you loaded those cards into a hopper, and they ran your program for you, and you got this stack of cards just to a simple program. So I really got, that was, if you think about it, was really good learning experience for future life when you talk about my smart manufacturer, my Industry 4 experience, because you get to think about the sequence of things and how they happen. And it really helps in project management as well, because if you think about it, the tools in project management, how are things sequenced, how do they have to flow, and what are the relationships between two things. But now that's, if you think about it, back to being that age, you never thought of that, that would play a large part in how I apply today my thinking.
Okay. And the point of being accepted and then declining to go on to a different path, was that influenced externally? Was it just you had interest in other things?
No, I was always, tough child. We'll get to that. I didn't have any pocket money, so I had to go and earn my own. So at the age of 13, I went out to get myself a job, a Saturday job and an evening job. And I ended up going to the local Italian ice cream factory called Varisha's in Portsmouth, and I think they took pity on me, so they employed me. And I worked there every weekend and some evenings during the week growing up, starting at like 15 pence an hour or something, worked my way up at that time. And I stayed with them till I qualified for university when I was 20, earning money just to pay my way and pay for everything myself. So I really became self-sufficient quite early in my life, because things were quite hard. There was miners' strike, Thatcher government, everything growing up in that period. So huge influences. So you had to find your own way. So I built that resilience fairly early in my life.
I was going to say, it feels like there's probably some challenges and experiences that you had earlier on in your life compared to others that have built that independence and resilience that you've probably then taken through the rest of your life and into your career.
It definitely helped me when that defining moment happened in my life. So, but it didn't help in the sense of the emotional side of things, which is I'm learning now as I get older. It's something you should have dealt with a long time ago. But
so just to finish off the piece about role models and influences, what was your relationship like with your granddad then? He seems like quite an important person in your life.
Unfortunately, he died when I was fairly young, but he was a jolly, tubby man, rather like a Santa Claus figure. He had a great workshop in the back garden, every tool you can imagine. So I used to spend a lot of time out there with him. And then when he died, I used to still go over there and help my grandmother by doing the decorating and everything else, because, it was an escape for me. Had a great garden, backed onto a great field you could go and play in as well. So I often saw my cousins there, and, you get escape from the doldrums of being in the house all the time. So he was a strong influence earlier on, and, that's probably where the influence of the RAF came from. I did learn that... a great uncle of mine was Air Vice Marshal as well, so there was a strong influence on that, but I never followed it. But maybe I would have done well in that, or they don't know, who knows. But I think I've done fairly well what I've done recently myself. So, I suppose Adrian Varisha at the ice cream factory, he gave me a huge opportunity. Not only was I making ice cream for many years, but it got me to maintain the machines and take them apart and put them back together again and learn how they worked. He trusted me. I don't know how he managed to trust you, because I got a bit of a reputation in my early years of work. Is if anyone's going to be able to break anything, it's me. But that I found was a good thing, because you learn to understand how people think about using things. Therefore, you can build in that factor into a design. So let's try to make it more robust. Like me, I like to take things apart and figure out how they work. Let's stop people taking things apart. So it was a lesson learned. All these things, they build to your experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you mentioned sort of going out into your granddad's shed or workshop in the garden to sort of escape life, I suppose. And
Yeah.
that kind of leads me on to the next question. Are there any defining moments or experiences in your life that changed everything for you?
Yeah, as sorry, as I was saying, yeah, I spent a lot of time around my grandparents as a result of what was going on at home, and you didn't really understand that when you're younger, um, and now when you think about it in retrospect, it was a sign, and I think it was just something that was taboo within the family, and that really accumulated in what happened in later life. So when what happened was I spent a lot of my time independently living. I went to university of my own volition. I wasn't supported to go to university. My parents didn't want me to go to university. They wanted money coming into the house. But I said no. I want to go to university. So I had to pay for everything. I had to get through my A levels. I didn't do very well in my A levels because I wasn't given the space in the house to study. We had chores we had to do every single day. I think my mother was a bit of a she's a bit of a control freak. Unfortunately, she's for OCD. We had to polish, dust, and vacuum our rooms every single day before we were allowed to do anything, and that was before we went to school and when we got back from school. So we weren't allowed to do our studies. And then when I wanted to do my studies, well, you've got your brother and sister, you've got to look after them for a little while. Then it'd be up to midnight when I was trying to get my homework done, and that's why my homework was suffered. And when it came to doing my A levels, I didn't do as well, but I wasn't the only one that year. That Prince Edward, that was the year Prince Edward didn't do very well on his A levels as well, so I wasn't good company. But it stopped me doing what I wanted to do. I had an offer to go to Loughborough University to do cybernetics. It was in one of the first years that course was running. It's something that grew from doing that computers earlier in my life, and I thought that's the future. I want to be part of that future. And also, Loughborough was a great athletics university. Sebastian Coe had been there, and he just won the gold medal in the Olympics. So that's a good place to go. I thought. I went up there for an interview. Probably didn't do as well as I thought. So probably why I didn't get to go there is I didn't do very well in my A levels. But I did get to go to Southampton, but that really meant that I had to try and find my own way. And the only way I was going to do that was I still had to stay at home and then travel every day to Southampton. But in those days, we were lucky. There was a grant for travel to get to and from university. So I used to do that and with my to get the train every day for the first couple of years. But I managed to save up to buy a car and drove up. So everything was done by myself, no help from anyone. And that's true for many other events.
Yeah.
Like 18th birthday, 21st birthday, I paid for my own parties and dues for people to have to come and do because it wasn't going to be done by anybody else. So I had to do everything myself. Now, it wasn't all bad. I mean, my parents, when my siblings came along, my sister, sorry, she's a gym. She became interested in gymnastics, and some parents thought, "Oh, that's a good avenue. We'll help her with that." I mean, I found out later, like my mother never wanted boys, so we're onto a loser to start with. So when my sister came along, she was the third. Um, they spent all their time supporting her rather than myself and my brother, to be honest. And my sister became an Olympic gymnast for rhythmic gymnastics. So she was on the team with Gary Yorath in the Commonwealth Games and everything. So there's a lot of connections there, a lot of things. But went off and did my own thing. So I thought I'd go and do my own sports. So when I did karate, studied karate for a number of years and got to the black belt standard. So, but I haven't done anything like that since I was 21. So I pose no threat to anybody for that. But this was my
And
coping method to be able to stand up to my father. Because I knew
okay.
he was well versed in being able to do something damaged, but I could. You'd have to think twice about doing it to me. You see, so but
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
And during this time of growing up, you've obviously grown up very
yes,
quickly, and I imagine maybe not a lot of feeling of emotions at that point. It's just, and like reflecting back, are you able to understand how you felt at the time? Do you know how you felt?
well. I was angry. I guess I was angry, and but I shut everything off, and that reflected even further when I got married. Unfortunately, um, when I got married, no, that was great. Meeting my wife was great, obviously, and we. But I was 30 when I met my wife, which was quite late in life. Haven't really formed any attachments with anyone up to that point in time, and it was a setup.
Mm.
Her cousin married my cousin, and said, "You look after this girl for the day." hoping that I would stop enjoying myself. I guess I was doing a lot of things. I was working away in Smith's Industries on the aerospace and defence side at the time, and with one of my best friends who became my best man at the wedding, who now he works in Formula One for Sauber, but he was with Benetton and Ferrari for that. So we used to build racing cars in time, and I was enjoying myself too much. So and it was costing me too much money. They thought you need to invest in something else. I think, you know, that's more things. Things I like to do. But getting married was great. I mean, my wife and I. She's an Irish girl, hence now I'm living in Ireland. Um,
Yeah.
and we got married, and we had our first child with it a year later. And obviously, you think you need a support mechanism when you get your first child. And the only support mechanism we
Mm.
had was, unfortunately, my parents. And that didn't go very well at all. Um, they, we reluctantly left my daughter with her for time, so my wife could pay back her maternity leave, and we were only going to do it as long as we had to do, because I didn't want my daughter suffering the same influences and same pressures and expectations, you know, trying to force their will on the way that she should be raised, and that caused a huge eruption. It got so bad that it got ended up in family court because
Mm.
they disagreed vehemently with the way that we wanted to raise our daughter, and such a point they reported us. It was for no reason whatsoever. They dragged us through because they could, but I won. But it cost me a lot of money initially.
Mm.
It cost me so much in lawyers. I had to stop. I had to do it myself because it was costing me too much money. I was going to lose the house if I continued with that. Um, so I said I'd defend myself, and I went into the court, told the judge a story, and we won, which went down very, very badly. What happened? My
I bet.
mother had obviously didn't like my wife at all, so she tried to research her background and try and get some dirt on her. Sent someone over to Ireland to learn more about her, and the judge was horrified, as you can imagine, by this whole attitude.
Yeah.
You're a control freak. You should not be acting like this. And for her to hear that was just like a red rag to a bull. So, and I ended up leaving the court, and my father came up to me and thumped me full hard in the face in front of everybody. As I was leaving, I thought, shock. I didn't do anything. I thought, that's it. Let's get out of here. So they had to escort us out the back way, and get out. And so we thought, well, no, we can't stay in England anymore. So we're moving. So we packed
Yeah.
up, sold up, and went to Ireland. And then it was a bad time. There was not really many jobs at the time, so I was still working with BT at the time in London, and moving to Ireland, I had to fly back and forth and stay with friends during the transition period, and it took a long time to find a job in Ireland at that time because there'd been a crash lot of moratoriums on hiring. So, it took a couple of years, and then the role with Integra came up, and I jumped at it. And that really is what, that luck of finding that role sort of defined the way my life progressed from that point forward. But I buried myself in work as an emotional response to what happened. There's a lot more I can talk about what
Yeah,
happened to
I,
my
I
wife and
was
us, but it's just it's a difficult journey, and I don't think my wife would want to hear me talk about it, to be honest either. But
and and that was what I was going to ask you, like what influence did this experience have on you from a career perspective? So you've spoken about burying your head in work, but in terms of how you do your work, decisions you've made it sort of from that point,
yeah,
like
yeah.
how would you
So
describe it?
sort of facing what happened, I would just focus on work fully and spend an inordinate amount of hours working on problems. I'd always been a joined up thinker. I'd always been able to think outside the box when I was doing a project. When I was working for Eurotherm Recorders, I before that in another industry, I was designing automatic test systems for products, but I was joining it up. So this is my industry form head working away. Is I would say, look, how does the customer order come in? How do you then configure the unit? How do you validate, certificate it, and get it out the door in an automated way? So I joined all that up. That's my thinking. Design systems to make that all flow through seamlessly. And I went to BT. I brought that knowledge there. And as we designed the systems associated with the first voice over IP trading platform that we developed, we completely wiped the opposition off the face. So they disappeared as a result of what we launched. But as part of the asset management side of that, RFID was coming out. So we applied RFID tagging to the product, and I helped design the system that monitored that and all the systems so that you could monitor the inventory all the way through the system. Don't have to open up the box, scan it through the scanner, goes off to a site. You get on the site, all the assets are on that site. And then when it comes back to the history of the asset, so you can recall all the history of the asset within it as well. But which proved to be quite a good thing when 9/11 happened. That's another thing that I witnessed. We were actually in the control room in BT, connected to one of the dealing centres within the two towers when they got hit. So, witnessed that, what was happening, the signal just shut off, and you're looking at the television seeing what's happening, you're thinking, no, that was a horrifying moment in my life. But, and, later in life I went to New York and visited the scene of that, and you're thinking, it just brings it home. You were connected to them at that time when it happened, and and there's people we knew in those two towers. That's something else that but you shut yourself emotionally off from it, and I continued to do that through all these events. And when I went to work for Integra,
Yeah, and
that's why I did so well. I just focused on work, and I could bring that. I just focused on how to put things together, how to develop systems and processes that make everything work. When I went to Integra, I was sent to Valley Lab in Colorado for 3 months to do a technical transfer. So I just buried myself in that. It helped. What they sent me to do helped me bury myself in this work, and it just grew and grew. Responsibility. I think I did fairly well over there. Came back, said, "All right, we need a new plant manager for this facility. Let's go ahead and do that." So I took that responsibility. And I said, "Oh well," and they added more and more and more responsibility to me, and I just sucked it up like a sponge and did more and more hours, and then just avoided dealing with what happened in the past. And it's just my success has come from that. It's just working hard, but it's probably not the best thing for you emotionally. As when you
no,
start asking these
no,
questions, of, "Oh my God, what did I do?"
and Are there any specific lessons that you've learned? And I'll say event as one thing, but obviously the event is lots of things that have happened over years. But any lessons that you carry with you that you implement?
Yeah, I'm still a bit of a work fanatic. I plan to the nth degree because I'm able to think about any eventuality. So when I write a project plan, it takes the whole project plan for a project may be of a couple of thousand lines. My plans are often three or four times larger because I just you know I just naturally I'm devil's in the detail. I think that's why I was successful. But yeah, the devil is in the detail. That's the lesson I've learned. But I've also learned a harsh lesson that if you don't balance your work life with your family life, something else is going to suffer. Um, and I would say that my children, they're doing very well, but I wasn't there enough for them growing up. So they've got a certain sense of independence themselves as a result. Um, but
Mhm.
growing up in Ireland helped because there is support network, and they learn at a young age to communicate with each other very well. And so they've got a lot of
Mm.
friends between them. So I think that's great. Whereas I've got very few friends.
So with we started before we started recording, we were talking about support networks and that bottling things up, burying things is perhaps a generational thing.
Yeah,
Um, the part of the reason we started this podcast was because I lost my dad to suicide, and I think that
same.
there was so much support available that the stigma was still too much for him to accept that. And unfortunately resulted in him taking his own life for the things that he had bottled up. But it's hard when you now look at your current situation and the success that you've had over the past 20 years, and as you've been in the medical device industry, raised your children to have their own lives, to want to change things that have happened in your past because they have shaped who you are. So do you reflect at all on whether there are things that you would change, but if you were to change that, would you be the person you are
That's
today?
a very good question. I've thought about that a lot when we were building up to this. I would need to change the way I should never have buried myself in work. I should have talked about it. I think my wife
Hmm.
definitely needed more support than I gave her, and my children needed me to be here more than I was. Um, I was living in America a lot of their growing up period of time working with Integra because I'd done so well. I was asked to move to the US to show them how to do it, so to speak. So, but that was a detriment to the family life. So the relationship with my children has been strained. But it's only now, as I deal with that, that is coming back and be getting the opportunity to rebuild that relationship, which is great. And I've got my daughter here with me at the moment. She's coming up to 30, but she's she's here with mum and dad. Um,
Nice.
Nice.
And there must be so much satisfaction of building those
it
relationships and
is.
slightly different relationships on
No,
reflection
my
of
daughter and
how
I
you've been.
have always
Um,
had a fairly good relationship. I mean, I was there for the whole Harry Potter coming out and doing it, so that was daddy daughter thing because every new book and every film we went to see together, and we made sure we stayed at the
Lovely.
whole sequence of all the films all the way through. It's my turn getting into her 20s, and you know having other things to. But that
Mhm.
was daddy daughter time. So so it has
nice.
worked in some respects. It's not been the best, but no, she's here now, and she's unfortunately she's quite like me in the sense that she went into pharmaceutical engineering and doing very well at it. So
So was there a more recent positive turning point that um, was the catalyst for you to start trying to
I
unpack some of
wouldn't
this and
say
communicate better?
positive. Um, there's two things that happened. One, I got let go by Integra. Um, they overstretched themselves, as you can appreciate. They purchased Codman Neurosciences from J&J, and I was part of the team that helped the transition of their R&D team into our R&D team, and obviously that worked very well. Um, but the project I'd been working on was coming to an end, and the shareholders were saying, hey, what are we going to do about the situation? We overstretched ourselves. So I think there was just say we've got to let people go. So, 100 of people like myself, middle senior management, were let go just like that overnight. One Christmas, as it always seems to happen at Christmas, I don't know why.
It's always Christmas.
And I was told just after Christmas that, I think, yeah, what's going Yeah, so I was on gardening leave for 3 months while they tried to hand over everything. They wanted me to, obviously, I got myself into a position where I was very important to them, but they needed to let me go. So I needed to work with them to transition out. I don't hold I did hold a grudge for quite a long time after that, but there's no point doing that. If you ever want an opportunity to work with people you've grown up with, you need to maintain that relationship in some way. So I facilitated that. But luckily enough, PM Group opportunity came up, and so I jumped to that. It was still in the medical industry, but not as close to the product as I'd like to do. So you realise that working in the medical device industry is very rewarding, and I'm missing that at the moment a little bit. With the work in Integra, we developed a lot of products in the neuroscience space. So one of it was the CUSA Clarity I helped was part of the development team for. That's for removing brain tumours. So we designed the new product for that, and during the KOL studies and the clinical studies, it was remarkable success from that. And when we headed to the launch of the product, it was exceptionally emotional because you've got all these patient stories come up on the screen, and you see that, and you just think, wow, did we just do that? And it's like a drug, I'd say. So when you get taken away from you want more of that. So I've always endeavoured, to be close to a medical device product. So any opportunity comes by, I jump at the chance to be involved in a project that has meaning. So going to PM Group, even though we're working on the capital side of things, I often act as a consultant to try and get closer to what's going on in the product side, because I understand how critical it is to people. And there's a couple of stories. I learned that my wife's a teacher in special needs as well, but she works in a school, and the headmistress there ended up having to have surgery to remove a tumour from the pituitary gland. And I found out she used the product we worked on for that. So you actually know someone really well that's their life's been saved as a result of something you did. So you just don't. The emotional, so that's when the emotional side of me started to come out. So that starts a momentum in your life. Then I joined PM Group, and COVID happened, so we're all stuck at home. In the room, you've got to talk to each other, so you end up talking about things you've never even talked about before to people, and even to your own family. You have to, because you're there, you're together, you've got to deal with a lot of other things going on. The unfortunate thing with COVID is it was my wife's 25th wedding anniversary. We couldn't even celebrate that. So we were stuck at home during that, and now we're coming up to our 30th wedding anniversary, and other circumstances have taken over, so I'm not going to get a chance to celebrate that at the moment because her father's very ill, and we're having to deal with that at the moment as well. So lots of things, but
And I think the early resilience that you learn, and that must have helped you through these challenges throughout your life up until now. And I think starting this podcast was as much an opportunity to share your story, but also for people to pick up some lessons if they're facing their own challenges. So is there any like practical tools or habits that you're aware of that you use for your resilience? You know, what advice would you give to someone that's facing their own challenges at the moment?
What I didn't have, as you say, as you alluded to, is I didn't have that support network. You need a support network. You need a coach or a mentor, who's gonna, someone you can bounce things off. I only started to get that later in life. I mean, when I joined Integra, there was a great man, Zev Hadass. He was a great mentor. He helped me in those early days of Integra grow through that emotionally as well, because working with an American company and working in the management side of things, there's a lot more political things that go on. I never understood the political side of things. I was always technically focused, and I am now in the role of technical director. Technical focus is where I sit, basically. But if I didn't have him as a sounding board, I wouldn't have done as well. And I found that with another colleague of mine, Martin. He's one of the first people I told some of the snippets of what happened in my life, and he said to me, "Yeah, you know what you're doing. You don't need to say to things. He's just pushed you that further. You know what you're talking about. Just do it." And I'd never had anyone tell me, "You know what you're doing. Just get on and do it," and write it down and tell other people how to do it. Which so I developed a lot of procedures and guidelines and that for Integra, which I hope they're using today. But and I continue to do that where I can.
And what do you think the industry can learn from a story like yours?
I think you got to watch there's always watch outs. I mean, I think you picked up on it when we started talking. When I started engaging with you, so there must be a story here. Otherwise, you picked up on that. I don't know how you picked up on it, but I think when you join a company in a senior role and you're given all this responsibility, and that person just continues to absorb and absorb, who's watching? You need someone in the company to watch for that work-life balance. Someone that just to talk to. I mean, I'd gladly do that for anyone now, I think, because I understand you need it.
Yeah.
But I didn't see any of that, in the support that I needed in that. But I just got on with it. I said, if someone else can do it, I can do it. And I've always had that. And and I've always said, nothing's impossible. Only people are. So I've always said that if someone tells me I can't do something, I'll try and figure out how I can do it.
Yeah.
And that's what I've stayed. So I've done it. I've just been. Luckily, I've been left to my own devices a lot. In all the companies I worked for, I just realised that I could do it without any help, and I just got on with it. But you do need help.
And would you say you've got your person now that looks after you in, say, in PM Group? Have you got that
No,
person?
I still. I mean, people that.
Yeah.
I don't have anybody. No, I still don't have anybody. I work from home all the time, which for me is difficult.
Yeah.
I was always in the office, traveling a lot for work. COVID changed that whole dynamic. People travel less. You've got the green initiatives, rightly so in many respects. You don't want to pollute the atmosphere, but it was always face to face. And if I'm in the office once a month, that's a lot for me these days. And I'd like to do more. But the office is in Dublin. I'm in Limerick. That's a 2.5-hour journey each way. But I do try and call my colleague up every day, just have run banter across it. We don't really talk about personal things. It's always work related, but you just need someone to talk to. I'd go off my head if I didn't have someone to talk to. Some people say, "Oh, really?"
I think yeah, I think we all can relate to that, and particularly COVID made that even more apparent.
Yeah.
Where you took for granted just going outside and meeting the people. So yeah, no, I understand. And where do you see yourself going from here, both personally, professionally? What's the
Yeah,
plan?
I mean, like I'm 61 now, 6 years to retirement because I signed up for the longer stretch. Um, I don't, I don't feel that I'm ready to retire. I still feel a little bit unfulfilled. Um, I guess, I mean, I've been buried in work. I never really had a trajectory that was taking me to the higher roles because I spent so many years, the first 30 years, just really keep my head down, doing hard work, never really looking for responsibilities. Only when I got married and that I started looking for that trajectory.
Mm.
But there was a lot of influences in life. There was economic crashes, all sorts of things have happened. So it sort of stifled your progression a little bit. But I with PM Group, was going to move to the US, back to the US, where I got a lot of friends. I grew up, as I'm working over there with them. But that unfortunately didn't happen because unfortunately my wife's mother got taken ill and she died, so we couldn't move at the time. And unfortunately, we're in the same situation with her father at the moment. It's sort of family first, and that's something you learn is family has to come first. But we're still hopeful. Still have my visa, which is running out. I say I've got a lot more friends there than I have here because it's only in the latter life, and you start working with people over there. You start to build those relationships. I only started in later years to build those relationships with people, as you say, and they're mostly founded in the US at the moment. But who's to say that won't change?
Yeah.
But
And you mentioned how, if you can get involved in a project that's closer to the product, then you'll make sure you do that.
yeah,
What excites you most about the medical device industry?
oh, it's changing at a really fast pace at the moment. If you think about it, there's a lot of regulatory changes, where it's patient centric, patient first, which is right, obviously. That's driving enormous changes in the way companies develop their products. You've got to think there's connectivity coming through. There's Industry 5 influences. How do people use it? And that's exciting. You've got AI coming through. That's driving huge advances in drug discovery, in medical device. I mean, it's just accelerating. We used to think that it'd take you 5 years to launch a new product, then it went to 3 years to launch a product. People are getting faster and faster and faster, iterating a lot quicker, getting to failure a lot quicker, getting to the product out the door, learning when to release a product, learning that there's a life cycle. And I've tried to be on the cutting, always at the leading edge of that process with the products I've developed, first of the kind. But now it's even more exciting if you think about it. There's so much more happening in this world, which is why I said I needed to be involved in that. So I joined the AdvaMed committee for the big medical technology show that happens every year in the US. And I'm on the regulatory pathway program committee. I've been on the legal and on the CGMP committee. That's that helps me connect with what's going on and what the influences are, so that when I come back and work for PM Group, I can bring that knowledge to what's happening to our projects and with our clients, therefore that we can engage better in what they're seeing in the industry. And I think that's my role as not just the technical director. It's about the relationship with the client, because our success in PM Group has been through the relationship building with clients. And over 50 years now in PM Group have been through that growth with clients. But we need to take it a level on. You need to be ahead of the game. We need to bring innovation into what we do. So we need to understand what innovation they're facing so that we can be on the same trajectory. And that's what's exciting.
Enough to keep you busy for at least another 6 years then.
Well, hopefully longer.
Yeah.
Because, as I say, I don't feel that I'm my age. I just feel that I got still a lot more to offer. But you know, we'll see.
Yeah.
You never know with
Well,
health. I mean, you get wake up calls a lot of the time. I had a small accident this year. I fell off on top of a ladder off the roof and broke my arm and broke my leg.
Ouch.
First time I've done anything like that.
fully
So,
fully
that was
recovered?
a wake up call,
I bet. Um, so for a 45-minute conversation that we've had, it feels like you've shared so much, and I've got so much respect for you
I
for
appreciate that.
doing
Thank
that.
you.
And there'll be so many lessons that the listeners will take away from this, personally taking some as well. But if you were to summarize one key lesson from your journey, what would it be?
Yeah, I just believe that, I could have faced things a bit earlier in my life, um, dealt with things earlier. And I think that's the lesson learned. Don't run away from things because they're not going to go away.
Mm.
If you can find someone who can support you and help you deal with these things, then please do so, because they just get buried and buried and buried. They're gonna surface at some point in time when you're least expensive, when you're most vulnerable, and that just magnifies the effect of them. And yeah, you're gonna if you are burying yourself, who else is suffering as a result? What's important. Think about what's important, and just go with what's important.
A very good and important message to finish on. So thank you again, Sean, for
Thank you,
joining
thank you,
us.
thank you, Nathan.
Um, and yeah, just to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. You can find this on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all the usual places. And if you're interested in sharing your own story, please get in touch. If there's anyone in your network that you think would be a good guest, please make the recommendation. And we look forward to bringing more conversations to you very soon.
Thank you, very good.
Thanks, Sean.